So in this segment, we're going to be talking about opposition MPs demanding the full legal advice on the Northern Ireland Protocol Bill. Now, typically the government doesn't publish full legal advice. In this case, Parliament could try and compel it to, but the government have kind of ignored some of the Parliament's compulsions to reveal certain types of advice the government have gotten, especially over a certain lord who's not from here. This article from the 12th of June. Opposition parties have demanded ministers release their full legal advice over a bill to unilaterally amend the protocol. I'm also very interested in this because I want to see what Braverman's justification is and whoever else was involved in this. That's expected imminently in the Commons, so that's already happened. The bill sets the UK on a potential collision course with the EU, and critics see as Boris Johnson's latest attempt to mollify rebellious backbenchers. Essentially, this is there to keep the ERG on side, which it looks like it has done. It looks like they've got most of what they wanted, considering Truss allegedly consulted the ERG on the bill. And this is to reassert his authority. Now, we know some of the key points of the protocol changes the government are unilaterally making, which definitely look like they breach international law here. One of those is the dual regulatory thing we've spoken about, creating a green lane so goods that are staying in Northern Ireland aren't going to face any checks. But how do you know what's staying in Northern Ireland? They've talked about the creation of a trusted trader scheme, which the UK botched under Frost. And of course, access to the data, which the UK still isn't allowing the EU to get a hold of. Downing Street officials said the government had received full advice whether a one-sided attempt to change the deal risked breaching the protocol, but that it only planned to publish a summary. And let's not forget that it's alleged that they haven't consulted the independent barrister who's meant to advise the government on stuff like this, Sir James Eddy. The Northern Ireland Secretary Lewis said the bill was intended to protect the integrity of the Good Friday Agreement, which we know that it's not going to do, especially on the other hand when the government are trying to take us out of the, essentially trying to get rid of the European, the Human Rights Act, effectively, which would breach the Good Friday Agreement. Sorry, my brain melted there for a second. And that was when people saw the legislation, they would understand it did not contravene international law. I mean, we've seen the draft of it, it's not promising. Asked whether the full advice would be published, Brandon Lewis told Sky's Sophie Ridge on Sunday the government would be outlining our legal position, but again, only a summary. Quizzed 3 times about whether Sir James Eddy, the senior barrister who involves giving government independent advice, advised on this legislation, Brandon Lewis refused to say, which means most likely he didn't. Brandon Lewis saying, "I'm not going to get into the internals of government advice," he said. "The government lawyers are very clear that we are working within the law. The Attorney General, Suella Braverman, will be setting out the government's position tomorrow." She didn't actually really set out the government's position. She didn't really explain how it's legal. She just talked about bits about societal damage, how Stormont's closed and how that's a part of the Good Friday Agreement, etc. The shadow Northern Ireland Secretary Peter Kyle said the bill had a potential for a malicious and rogue governments to interpret it as a green light for unilateral action against international treaties. They talked about the need for necessity and things like that. I mean, what if China used that argument to take over Hong Kong, for example? It's ridiculous. He added, given this, it is incumbent on ministers to release the maximum possible advice from the start so the legal basis upon which they make their case to Parliament can be judged. Obviously, I think MPs may be able to consult their own kind of lawyers on this one to see if it is actually legal, because they're going to be voting on this stuff. Civil servants can, I think, as well. The Lib Dem spokesperson on the Northern Ireland, Alistair Carmichael, said the refusal to publish this legal advice looks like yet another attempt to cover up Boris Johnson's repeated lies on law breaking. I mean, that's true. I mean, you can't argue with that. Why would you not publish the legal advice around something you're claiming you have absolute legal authority to do? I guess the only time Suella Braverman and the gang are going to do it is when they end up in the European Court of Justice. The government must come clean and publish what legal advice was received from who in full. I mean, Parliament has to try and compel the government to do this. That's what's going to have to happen, and I don't think they're going to have the votes to do it. The public deserves full transparency over the legality of plans to rip up the protocol and risk a trade war with our closest neighbours. If Conservatives have nothing to fear, they have nothing to hide. Classic police line there, but is not wrong in this case. Hardline Eurosceptics right of the party have put ministers under pressure to take tougher action, with MPs having held meetings with the Foreign Secretary Liz Truss. I mean, effectively, they got what they wanted. Brandon Lewis said the lack of flexibility we've seen from the EU over the last year is, that's a ridiculous statement. He's talking about how the EU are saying we want the October proposals are based on if the protocol is implemented in full. When I think the EU are well aware that's going to take a while, a few more years at least, to have the protocol implemented in full. Sinn Féin leader Mary Lou MacDonald said a significant majority of Northern Ireland's Assembly members elected in May backed the protocol, which is true. It's the majority of them do, and that it was clear ministers in Westminster intended to break the law. The protocol is working, she told Sophie Ridge's show. We've covered that. Gives the North uniquely unfettered access to the European market. That is why we see in the north of Ireland, in contrast with Britain, the Northern Ireland's doing really well outside of London. That is, Northern Ireland is doing much better than the rest of Great Britain, apart from London. I think London's the only one that's outperforming the rest of the country, which, it's a service economy. What the Tory government is proposing to is breaching international law, is to create huge damage to the northern economy, to the Irish economy, which is true. That's what, essentially this is going to put a massive hole in the EU single market if this thing goes through, and it will damage Ireland again, because what happens, where do you put the border? The Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves saying, we haven't seen the legislation yet. I mean, we have now, because it's a few days gone. But it does look like the government plan to break international law. I mean, the EU are taking legal action. This government seems to be developing a track record for law breaking, and it's not one that the Labour Party can support, which is true. Partygate, taking us out of the, threatening to take us away from the European Court of Human Rights, etc. I mean, this government love law breaking. She says, we helped bring the Good Friday Agreement. We are deeply and passionately committed to it. Labour's stance very much is to protect the Good Friday Agreement, and they're following kind of the correct interpretation, in my opinion, the EU's interpretation and the Americans' interpretation, that the protocol protects the Good Friday Agreement. It doesn't damage it. But yeah, hopefully we get this stuff published. I don't know if it will happen. Hopefully Parliament try and compel the Johnson cabinet to publish it. But I wouldn't hold my breath. But at least MPs are calling for it, and I think they should go full court press. Every news show, they should go on and say, look, if the government have got nothing to hide, publish the information, because the EU are saying you've broken the law, the Americans are saying you've broken the law. If there are any independent barristers out there who have advised on this, I would say those people, I'd cite those people as well. I would ask if the government had even asked their own independent barrister on this, regarding the legality of this. That's what I'd be doing, full court press, every interview. Opposition MPs should be taking every opportunity they can to appear in the media to make these points, but sadly they're not. But anyways, I'm going to leave it there. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, comment, share, subscribe, support the channel on Patreon if you can, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one.